A classic Western right in the vein of something like the Ox-Bow incident, and an era where thousands of Westerns were being made of dubious quality for the basic shoot-'em-up entertainment value of it. There's a few that really stand out as well-done stories. This is one such story. Glenn Ford, Van Heflin, Felicia Farr, 1957, 3:10 to Yuma. In its own way, without dealing with real frontier travels, settlement life, in its own way, 3:10 to Yuma is really about the courage to extend civilization out from sea to shining sea. Those pioneers that went west brought with them all the problems of sinful humanity, including poverty and hunger and loss, which then can lead very easily to crime and theft and murder, and roving gangs of ne'er-do-wells who steal what other people have, more than willing to kill to take it. And the question that lingers for those men and women settling on that frontier, at what point is it worth it to stand up against injustice and risk your life? The almost certainty of your death for standing up for what is right, is it worth it? And how do you calculate that? Is it worth it to die ultimately a martyr for truth, justice, and the American way, to be a symbol to future generations that you don't have to live with this fear and with the corruption of civilization in this manner? What is the price you're willing to pay? And so it revolves around the rancher, who immediately is, because of the activities of the gang, robbing a stagecoach, he is drawn in, his animals are there in the way, they get scattered. He spends time recovering them. He becomes a witness to a man being shot for trying to resist the robbery. His own wife sort of leans on him, a little bit of shame that he didn't do more and maybe he should do more. And this will come full circle as finally they manage, because he delays for a personal liaison, they manage, the authorities and the wronged parties seeking justice manage to get a hold of the gang leader himself, and they need to get him away before his roving gang of men come back for him. And so there's this whole espionage sort of mission of smuggling the bad guy under arrest secretly from place to place, to get him to the right place, to catch the train at 3:10 to Yuma, to get him into custody with the proper authorities, to get away from this dangerous area where his thugs and hooligans could find him at any time, learn where he is through spies or agents, any kind of word of mouth, and come in force and take him away. And so every man on this posse risks their lives, and they know this, and they will ultimately, with the rising tension, have to decide each for themselves at what point it's not worth it anymore, and to stand down, to run away, to hide, or to flee. In this, the film does a great job, like the Ox-Bow incident before it, from the great book of that same name, of giving us that real life and death tension and that real struggle. There's not a whole lot of shootouts. There's not a whole lot of bandits. There's no chasing down hostile Indians. But 3:10 to Yuma is really about the rising tension of the rising degrees of risk and danger and what one is willing to do, until finally our protagonist's wife herself comes back and says, "Let it go. I'm sorry if I made you feel like you were pressured. We'll just let the bad guy go and go home so that we can be safe." But he won't do it. And ultimately, the way things unfold, because he did save the life of the bad guy from a vigilante, a would-be vigilante who was going to kill him before he got to trial, ultimately, while trying to get him out of town to the train, with snipers on the roofs and thugs around corners and men hidden behind barrels, finally they get to the train, and the villain actually cooperates at the end and is willing to jump so they can get on the train, because he himself has come to the conclusion that I owe him. He saved me from a vigilante. At what point then is it worth it to him, his sense of personal honor? And it really leaves you with that sense of the vagaries of life, of how do you live in this environment and this misery. And some will take up crime, but they will try to maintain a code of some kind of honor to live with themselves and what they're doing. And this is sort of the shootout and you don't draw until the clock clicks sort of mythos of the Old West, which, however mythologized and unreal, symbolizes something very real, which is that struggle of humanity to bring civilization with it. Can we go out into the wilderness where there's no civilization and build it? And can we cling to it when we're wronged, when there's a murder, when there's a rape, when there's a robbery, when there's cattle rustling? Stealing a man's cattle puts his very life at risk of starvation, or stealing his crops. It is murder or attempted murder. So at what point do you just hang somebody from a tree and say, darn it, we're just going to do this? And at what point do you suck it up and say, no, we're going to do it the right way. We're going to get them to the nearest large enough municipality where there's a judge. We're going to get a trial, and then we'll hang them there. And what's the difference between hanging them there and hanging them here? Hang them high. The difference is one way is legal and civilized and the other is not. And then the question is, yeah, I'd rather just hang them now, but what sort of future are you building for your kids? All of these things come up in 3:10 to Yuma in their own way, and that sense of that tension really gives you something to contemplate. Really, again, in an era where 1,000 bad Westerns were made that you just can watch because what the heck they're shooting, it's one of those that stands out as really driving home an important point that is timely for the history it's set in, and really always timely for the human experience everywhere, giving us protagonists, both good and bad sides of the law, in and out of the law, that we can empathize with and learn something from.